Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is, I wanted to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Today is February 24th, 2021, and the meeting is called to order at 6:01 p.m. The first thing we have on the agenda is the motion to approve the minutes from the February 4th meeting. Can I get someone to make a motion to approve?
This is Christy. I'll make a motion.
Thank you. And a second?
This is David. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? I think we're all ayes. Any opposed? No. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead. Oh, and am I supposed to introduce myself? Sorry. My name's Sujata Goyal, and I'm the vice chair of this committee, which is why I didn't introduce myself. Cynthia was unfortunately out today managing a family matter, so I'll be chairing the meeting today. All right, so now I think our minutes have been approved. Yes? Okay, great. And then I don't see anyone here with public comment, but I wanted to, do we have any public comment and no one emailed or?
No,
Okay.
No emails, and no one let me know that they were going to want to speak for public comment tonight.
Okay, excellent. So there is no public comment tonight. And so I guess we will move on to the heart of the agenda. And so I'm going to pass it on to John, who's going to give us some information about the TIP.
Thanks. Stephen's going to go ahead and load up the presentation for me tonight. I've got another meeting at 7 o'clock, so if the item lasts longer, Stephen will finish this one out. We're here tonight to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program and the current update. Next slide. Tonight's discussion, we've got a couple questions for you. And the first one is, does the TAB agree with the strategy for how we're proposing to use the traffic impact fees and the bicycle and pedestrian mitigation fees? And I'll present the strategy for those two different buckets of funding. And then the next discussion point is what projects to prioritize that will be funded with either the School Zone Safety Fund or REIT, Real Estate Excise Tax. And so we'll keep these questions in mind as we're going through the presentation. Next slide. Couple things for the Transportation Improvement Program is we're looking at the next 6 years, and that's where these discussions are going to be focused on, which is more of a short-term discussion. There's some other long-term discussions for how best to incorporate the goals and policies of the Mobility Master Plan into what we do long-term for transportation, and we'll have those discussions with the TAB later on. Another thing is we've tried to really break this out by funding source, so that way if there's a project that the TAB is really excited for, we make sure that we have a funding source identified for it. And we'll discuss the Mobility Master Plan priorities. And one thing I want to apologize for, I messed up on the agenda. There was something that got added to the packet yesterday that was the top 30 Mobility Master Plan priority projects. And so I hope you guys got to see it. If not, we can pull it up during the discussion part. Next slide. As I mentioned, one of the things that I wanted to discuss is the strategy for the traffic impact fees. And inside the agenda packet was a sheet that showed which projects are eligible and how eligible they are for traffic impact fees. And the strategy that we're proposing for the Transportation Improvement Program is to focus on these three projects: the 12th and SR 900/17th intersection project. That's the third and final project of the Costco Development Agreement. And so the city's already made a commitment to get that project built. So we have to move forward with that one. And then the next two are the two Newport Way projects, the first one being Newport Way between SR 900 and 54th, and Newport Way between Maple and Sunset. These are two projects that will make intersection improvements, build bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and the city's already received federal funding for design on both of these projects. And so we have an obligation to move these two projects forward to eventually complete them through construction. And because of that, I really want to use the traffic impact fees to the maximum extent possible to try and accomplish getting these two projects built, because they're both really expensive projects. Their estimates are right around 30 million, and they'll need to be phased. But just in terms of not wanting to have to pay back the design funds that we've already received. And so I guess at this point, I think would be a good time to pause for discussion and feedback.
Okay. We can either go around and ask questions, or if somebody has a question, if you could put your hand up, then that would help. But one question I have, John, real quick, is on these three, I didn't have a chance to look over the spreadsheet, but do you know what the score was of these, based on our plan priorities?
I can quickly find the two Newport Way projects, and it'll take me just a little bit longer. I can get the 12th and SR 900 score.
Okay, thank you.
Because 12th and SR 900 was not in the top 30, but.
Okay. And in the chat, let me open up the chat. Christy, I noticed you physically had your hand up. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment when it was appropriate.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Again, being the newbie, I did want to share. So from my observation, just being in the community and watching the evolution of these projects, they're well in motion, even though I recognize they don't line up with the MMP kind of alignment. I think all of these projects fall almost to the very lowest of the list, but they're also projects that are important for mobility, but also from the perspective that external funding was worked really hard to achieve. The TR4 was recipient of some legislative funding that was hard earned and senator supported. And then on the Newport Way projects, those have been conversations that were decades in the making, and also, I believe, recipients of external funding. So it's hard to kind of blend the two as we go, but important projects nonetheless.
Yeah. Thank you, Christy. That's really good background and information on those three projects. And then in the chat, it sounds like Jerry has a question.
Yes, I found it interesting as to what Christy was saying, that these projects don't meet the MMP requirements, or they don't get prioritized based on that plan. Is that what she was saying, pretty much? That was one question. So, and then the second question was, so if they're funded for design, then do we have to go back and apply for funding for construction then later? Is that how it works?
Yes.
That's the other question.
So I'll go over each of them. And first of all, I'll go over the scores. And I still need to find the score for 12th and SR 900, but the Newport Way SR 900 to 54th scored 50 on the MMP priority, so it was pretty high up there. And the Newport Way Maple to Sunset scored 46, which was pretty good.
That's pretty high too? That's high too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then, let's see here. So for construction, we have design funding for both projects. And then for the, well, let me back up. Oh, I'll talk about the two Newports and I'll come back to 12th and SR 900. So for the two Newport projects, we have design funding. For Newport Way SR 900 to 54th Street, we have funding for acquiring right-of-way that will be available in 2024 that we received a grant last spring for. And then for Newport Way Maple to Sunset, we have a little bit of right-of-way funding that actually came from the long ago Front Street Bypass project that made its over to this project. But we will need to acquire more right-of-way in order to build, or more money for right-of-way. But on that one, I think what we could do is use city funds to acquire the right-of-way and get grants for construction. And I think it would be the Maple to Sunset, at least for the first phase or two, would be very competitive for funding and hard to beat.
So the Maple to Sunset, so it's 100% funded for design? It's
Yes.
what you're saying, so you could have a shovel-ready project. Cool.
Well, we'd have to
Except for the right-of-way.
Yeah, except for the right-of-way, yes. But we do have enough traffic impact fee money that if we wanted to, we could use that for the rest of the right-of-way, and we could have a shovel-ready project, yes. And then for the 12th and SR 900 project, as Christy said, we have the $1.5 million from the state legislator that's funding the design. Costco is funding up 48% up to a certain amount, which will end up being around 2 million, give or take, depending on where the accounting comes to. And then Isabella and I met with the Transportation Improvement Board recently and discussed this project. And once we have this one ready to go close to construction, it's got a very high probability of having construction funds. So I'm hoping that the city will be able to build this project with little to no of its own funds. But I don't want to get too excited until we actually sign the agreement on the grant.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a comment if I can make a comment. It seems that this is falling into the MMP goal of investing wisely, I guess. There's not really, it's almost like we need a different category of, I don't know how to capture this, of like, there's momentum, right? We were talking about, you know, there's like, there's been, as Christy noted, like lots of behind the scenes work and like a big history of things behind this. And so I'm not quite sure. I think for me, like that best falls in the category of like, I think it's like the fifth one for just investing wisely and whatnot.
If I can jump in real quick, John. Yeah, Erica, I think you make a pretty good point. We did try to discuss adding a different category about projects that have kind of momentum. But then when we started scoring it, it didn't really matter because we have to do them anyway, particularly because they're federally funded. We're required to do those projects or else give the money back. And so it didn't really make a difference. But yes, you're correct. It does kind of fall into that category of investing wisely, making sure that we're prioritizing the investments we've already made.
So, John, the question that you posed to us was whether the advisory board agrees with, supports the strategy for these traffic impact fees. I want to make sure I understand these three projects. Is this to state essentially that the proposed strategy is to use the traffic impact fees for these three projects? And then in addition to that, what is the total for the traffic impact fees and what would that actually pay if we were to say, yeah, that is the strategy? How much does that actually buy us for each of these?
Oh, good question. So, yeah, the strategy is to focus using the traffic impact fees on these three projects to get them done and to take advantage of momentum and other funding. as for what you get, right now, the estimated balance on the traffic impact fees at the beginning of the next TIP cycle, which is 2022, is about $4 million. And then it's estimated that we have $700,000 of revenue per year for traffic impact fees. As for how much that gets us, it kind of depends on how successful we are or not for getting grants. I think what we could do is the first phase on both of the two Newport projects. So like on Maple to Sunset, I think we could build the improvements from Maple through the intersection at Juniper, but then the next TIP cycles when we would have to continue that corridor project moving southward. And then for SR 900 to 54th, kind of the same thing where we could do a phase of it, but we wouldn't have enough to get the whole thing done.
So the traffic impact fees, could they entirely fund whatever the gap is right now for any one of these projects? Like the 12th Avenue SR 900, if we said, yeah, that's the priority within the strategy, does that completely cover that and then leave some left over for one or both of the Newport Way ones?
It would. For the 12th and SR 900 project, I think we would need about $3 million if we did not receive another grant. And there would be enough to cover that and keep the two Newport Way projects going.
Okay. And traffic patterns for Newport Way, do we know, do people typically drive just the section Maple to Sunset, or the part that would be affected from Maple to Sunset, and not SR 900, and the people that do the SR 900 54th don't drive the Maple to Sunset? Or is traffic patterns really, it's a lot of people using that Newport Way travel that whole range?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know what the distribution of people who travel both. I would imagine there would be some who would travel the whole way, because if someone lived like in the Oak Crest neighborhood and wanted to go to, they would probably drive the whole corridor.
So if I understand that correctly, the question was if they come out of the 900 First Avenue, basically the Costco, Holiday Inn, BCC area, and if they turn, there's probably a percentage that goes onto the freeway, percentage that goes straight 900, and a percentage that goes down to Newport goes that way. I would say that just from living here for 25 years, the percentage going down Newport was probably going to be less, because there's other ways to go where they go back over to by the Home Depot and go back that way. So yeah, I don't know if the question was some of those. I mean, I think that the 917th is kind of separate itself to address all the issues that are there. Besides the Maple to Sunset, which I would kind of see as probably the next priority over 900 to 54th, or need, and probably grant-wise, because it's a walkable way to the elementary school safety. So there's a lot of factors in that would help that rise in a grant application as far as the school safety acts.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. That's kind of what I was trying to understand, because I will admit I'm much more a visual person, and I'm trying to picture these in my head, and compared to a picture, a little different. So with the point that Tommy made about safety, if we said the 12th Avenue SR 900 is priority one, and then we wanted to direct as much as possible to just one of these two. I'm not saying we do want to do this, just as a question. Do both of them are they expected to have an impact on safety, and is one more so than the other?
They're pretty similar projects when it comes to the safety improvements. So without having gone through the accident history on both of them, I think that both would get pretty similar ratings for safety improvements.
What would be, in your opinion, the benefit of directing funding just to one versus both for the Newport Way ones? Like, do we get enough further along with one of them that it would really make sense?
I don't, and actually, I think what I would recommend is to show both of them to have phase one in construction in 2025 and 2026, where one would be in 25 and one would be in 26. And then when we go to the SDP or Surface Transportation Program grant application, we would put in for both of them. I don't anticipate that we will receive funding for both of them. And so I think what will happen is we'll receive a construction grant for one or the other of the two projects. And then the other one will be put on what they call the contingency list. But I think it would be near the top of the contingency list. And so what happens a lot of times is when we get our federal transportation funding for this region, a lot of times we have to go through a redistribution process, and projects that are on the contingency list move up and receive funding. And I have a feeling that is what will happen with these projects. And if I had to make a guess, I think based on what phase one of Maple to Sunset would be, I think that one would probably get funds first, but I could be mistaken. And then SR 900 to 54th would be put on the contingency list. But if we had the funds and could move quickly, which I think we could be in a position, then we could be finding ourselves building phase one for both those two projects. And I don't think that we would be able to build phase one and phase two at the same time. And usually the funding applications, they try and keep it where you're looking at building about a $5 million project. And so I don't think our match money would go as far if we tried to focus on one. I think if we tried to focus on both, we could get the most benefit from external dollars.
Okay, and it looks like Christy has a question or comment.
Yes, I just wanted to comment in support of what John was saying. I think it's really important to link the two projects. They both have different safety considerations, but both have an important focus for pedestrians, bikes. For one, if you think about in context of where the transit center is between the two, and then also in looking at the safety feature from pedestrian/vehicular, because we've got the old storm ditches, there aren't areas for turnouts. I recall in the past there were a lot of concerns by school bus drivers about navigating, and then also just kind of the pressure because there isn't the ease of access for navigating around vehicular and pedestrian traffic at the same time. So absolutely support what John was saying in terms of linking them and putting both in the queue for funding.
Any other questions or comments?
So if this is the proposed strategy, are there more slides to follow that we're going to discuss about this strategy, or is this really just the question right here, whether what's on the screen now is what you're looking to see tabs approval or?
Well, we could either do it now or later on we'll ask the same question again, and I will just defer to Sujata for how she would like to handle this.
Well, because I think the next set of stuff is a different funding source and kind of a different, right? It's a different bucket of money, different projects. So I think, if you guys are, as you're looking for direction on where the board is going, personally, I think it would make sense for us to sort of decide for these now and our recommendation, even though I don't think we have a formal recommendation on the agenda, correct? Like there's nothing we're really approving, but maybe provide you guys guidance, clear board guidance on these three projects or this approach, and then we can move on to the next section of projects, because this is already fresh in our minds.
Yeah, so Sujata is correct. It's not necessarily something we need to take action on. It's primarily us asking the question, here's our recommendation for approach. Are there any concerns or questions about this approach? And then just moving on to the next one.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it sounds like, to summarize from what I've been hearing, it sounds like a lot of us are very supportive of this approach, and think this is a good strategy for moving forward for multiple reasons. Is there anyone who feels like maybe this is not a good approach for the city and would want to sort of either provide a counter to this approach, or ask more questions, etc.? Otherwise, personally, I feel like the board is really coalescing around having confidence in the approach you guys have presented. Anyone? No?
Oh, I have my hand raised. I wasn't sure if.
Oh, sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
I think you answered part of my question. Is that the question to us is if we agree with the approach to use the traffic impact fees as presented for these projects as it was presented now, that we agree that the traffic impact fees, this is a good use for them to be put to these. So I guess my question is that the question that we're being asked to say we agree to?
Yes.
I guess if there are no other comments, the next step would be to a motion to disagree with the thought process and the plan for this from our perspective, saying that we
I don't
agree.
think we necessarily need a motion.
Yeah.
I think it's more of just feedback and more of a
Okay.
thumbs up, thumbs down type.
Yeah, I don't think this one didn't require a formal motion, but I think the conversation we had was really good. It provided a lot of good background, and I think it provides the staff some good direction on sort of what the board is thinking and kind of where we are. And so if Stephen and John, if you guys feel like you have a good handle on where we are with sort of this set of recommendations, we can move on to the next one, which is the pedestrian ones, right?
Yeah, I feel good with the feedback I got. Okay. Inside your packet, I did make an error on the list of, so that yesterday added was the Mobility Master Plan Top 30 projects. And on that list, I accidentally included a project that went from Tibbetts Valley Park to Squawk, and that was mistaken. That's not eligible for these funds. So the projects that are currently eligible for the bicycle and pedestrian mitigation fees are the Tibbetts Valley Frontage Improvements Project, which is in front of Tibbetts Valley Park, where the transit center is, and would also connect, or it'd be a non-motorized project primarily that would build bike and pedestrian facilities. And then the other possibility is there's a project on Northwest Juniper that will connect into the Newport Way project. And then the third one, which I didn't include on this, but I guess the tab could also have as a recommendation, is the Three Trails Crossing. So right now, a developer is building most of that crossing. However, we do need to come back eventually and make some vehicle improvements on the south side of the intersection. And so that would be an option too as well. The approach that I would like to do is to focus the bicycle and pedestrian mitigation fees on the Tibbetts Valley Frontage Improvement Project. And the reason for that is it scored pretty high on the mobility master plan scoring criteria, and I'll try and pull that up to tell you guys what that was. It scored higher than the Juniper One project. And later this year, there's going to be a grant competition for the Transportation Alternatives Program, which can do a number of things, but one of the things it can do is build non-motorized improvements. And with this project being located right along the Regional Growth Center, I think it would be a very strong project to compete in that competition. And so kind of going with the theme of trying to maximize our funds is to use bicycle and pedestrian mitigation fees to match, hopefully, a transportation alternatives program and build these non-motorized improvements. And this project also would connect the two Newport Way projects. So from a user's point of view, it'd be great because once all three of these projects are built, we'd have great non-motorized facilities all the way from 54th to Sunset. And so a similar question to the traffic impact fees, does the tab support this strategy?
You had me at maximizing our funds, but I also really like to hear that it would be able to connect with these other ones, because I'm a big believer in the more our non-motorized projects actually connect to each other, they sort of build on value more than just what each independent one delivers.
Yeah, I would second what Mike is saying. I think this is all, that sounds very good.
I'd like to third what you were both saying, if that's possible, because going back to the MMP, I think it hits that first one, right, of mobility and connectivity. If we're lining up an entire segment for a city that is bisected by a interstate highway, I think I would fully agree with those statements.
I'd agree also. I like being able to tie the three of them together and strategize on the funding and building part. So I think that's good.
Does anyone else have any other comments? Are we all feeling thumbs up then on this one? All right. Okay, that sounds good. So I think, does this give you guys the feedback you need then?
Yep.
See, non-motorized is always so much easier than motorized. Okay, so is there more we need to discuss as far as the tip?
Yes.
I think so, right?
Yeah, there's one other bucket of categories, and that is the city has the ability to use the school zone safety fund and some of the REIT funding to do a little bit more. More so the school zone safety fund, which could be used for ADA or non-motorized improvements. It could be used for safety. And so this is for anyone who's driven by the middle school and high school and gone a little bit too fast and gotten a ticket in the mail. Those funds go to pay for operating the camera and also go into the school zone safety fund. So we have some more opportunity to try and build some mobility master plan projects. And I think this bucket of money gives us the most flexibility. And I think we would have about $600,000 a year that we could use this funds for. And so inside your packet was the mobility master plan top 30 projects. And for one of the categories, so these ones were sorted by funding source. And so if you open up, if you have that attachment or if you've had a chance to review it, the first one talked about the bicycle and pedestrian mitigation fees. And then the second page talked about projects sorted by how well they scored. that would be eligible to be funded through the school zone safety fund or through real estate excise tax. And so like the first project on that list is the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail, which that's more of a long-term big project that actually includes both the Newport projects and the Tibbetts Valley frontage and then some other work. And so if we think of that one more of like a long-term aspirational goal, I'd recommend skipping on that one. But then we start getting into things like trying to build bike lanes on Southeast 56th. That's would basically connect the Brown Bear Car Wash to East Lake Sammamish Parkway, or to, we have the Tier 1 sidewalk gaps as a potential project. That's basically the mobility master plan prioritized the sidewalk gaps that we have in the city, and the Tier 1s, looks like we have almost 24,000 feet of Tier 1 sidewalk gaps that we would like to eventually get built. The next project that ranked was the Newport Way 54th to city limits, which I think once we complete the other two Newport projects would be a great project, but I wouldn't want to take on another multi-million-dollar project until we complete the current ones.
So, John, that's going in the opposite direction, correct? Going
Yes,
westbound.
correct.
Okay.
So it'd go from 54th to Bellevue.
Right. Okay.
Yep. And then there's a project to do some non-motorized facilities on Gilman, and I think that project goes from Triple X Root Beer, and then it goes on to 3rd Avenue and connects into the Old Town neighborhood. There's a simple project that we could do on 220th Avenue that would build bike lanes. That's, so if you're at, I think that would be FedEx, Taco Time, that intersection, and you head towards those office buildings where the school district has offices, and Microsoft and Costco and some others. And then another one is the Northwest Sammamish Road Pinch Point. That's a project that would connect the neighborhood south of Lake Sammamish, sometimes called South Cove, to the state park, and then the sidewalk gaps. And the rest of the list is in there, but instead of just listing all of them, I just wanted to try and get some feedback, see what direction you guys would like to go on these.
How much revenue is there for the school zone safety fund, and is it pretty consistent year to year?
The assumption is consistent. I'll look up the exact amount. I know it's a little bit more than 600,000. Well, the revenue is higher, but once we take off the amount that goes to the contract to run it, it looks like there would be about $625,000 a year to be able to use for that.
Tom, I see your hand up.
Yeah, a question on the Gilman 3rd Avenue. Is that where it connects to the little small bridge that goes over the creek and then connects to the old neighborhood? And would that
Yes.
be widening that bridge so it's more of a pedestrian, like a path bridge, as opposed to just a narrow pedestrian bridge?
It certainly could be. It's not currently defined, and I recently had a cost estimate done that included both doing everything but the bridge and including the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And those cost estimates would fit inside the kind of revenue projections you have?
I think we'd have to save up. So if we wanted to do that project, I can't remember its exact cost estimate, but I think what we'd have to do is not use the school zone safety fund for several years to be able to afford to do the third.
Sort of save up.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. You know, one thing, so I have a comment. One is on the sidewalk gaps. You know, personally, I like the idea of sort of having, you know, there are these gaps out there. They've been out there for a long time. I like this idea of being able to, you know, close those gaps, create longer stretches of mobility, you know, non-motorized mobility for people that's safe. it's like, it feels like a little gap. Maybe it's a small investment, but for the person who lives in that neighborhood where that gap separates them from access, like for me, a gap separates me from Target and being able to walk there safely to buy my toothbrush. So I feel like for people who live in these neighborhoods or in these places where there are those little gaps, investing in that, it feels like it could provide a lot of relief all over the city and potentially create some really positive non-motorized benefits. So that would sort of be where I'd want to throw some resources. Okay, I think Erica's next.
Yeah, my well, maybe this is a completely unfounded concern, but because it sounds like the school zone safety fund is pretty consistent, but I'm a little worried about attaching a funding source that has some potential, it could be kind of wavy, I guess, or it's not consistent every year to like the dime. I don't know if that any kind of fund like that exists, but attaching it to some more like ADA focused projects, because if something, we're planning for something and then some kind of odd event happens where suddenly like the funds from that really just dive down, and now we aren't able to carry out, some project or like fun projects that like a specific community was like really looking forward to as like a means of frankly justice, I guess. I would have some concerns there, but if that fund is truly like pretty stable, then that would assuage my concerns a bit. Maybe that's just a completely unfounded concern.
Thank you. And then I think Micah, and then after that, Joseph.
So before I say my comment, I have a quick question for John. Sidewalk gap to 24,000 feet. How much is it how much does 1,000 feet of sidewalk cost? Or 100 feet, or whatever they use as a normal metric, just so I have an idea of what that means in terms of dollars.
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, it really would vary, but why don't we have go on to other things, and then on my other monitor, I'm going to try and look up something that might give us a little bit of a rule of thumb.
So then I guess I'll just make my comment anyways. So kind of actually reflecting what you said, Erica, the sidewalk gaps, and so Jonathan, for that matter, it addresses accessibility, which is something that it's stated in the master plan as a goal. We've all agreed as a goal. And I kind of actually like the idea of saying, hey, we have this revenue source. It varies a little bit. If the sidewalk gaps is enough more than 600K a year, if 600K doesn't do all 24,000 feet, we can just put all of that each year towards that and just use this as this fund essentially to go and close sidewalk gaps. And then we can figure out what our priorities for where we want to focus are. But then it is if there's less a given year, you just do less of that sidewalk gaps, or because there's one that's a really high priority or there's a big safety issue because of it, we can talk about separate funding for that. But I kind of like this neat sort of, people running the red light cameras in cars, and we're going to go and solve some accessibility issues with it as a reoccurring yearly activity.
Thank you. And then Joseph?
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quickly that I agree with what you said, Sujata, and also Micah. I think that fixing the sidewalk gaps would probably be a pretty big priority. Like, not only is it scoring high, I don't know what the cost estimate is because it doesn't say here. But I think it'd be a pretty big or important project, mainly in order to get more people like off the road and getting places through walking. And not only that, but just like for pedestrian safety, I think it's a pretty important priority.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. I don't think I see any more hands, and I don't necessarily see anything else in the comment section. And I think just in the interest of time, if there's anyone else that wants to comment, we'd love to hear more feedback, or maybe if there's somebody who thinks there's a different priority project that we could potentially discuss with these funds, we'd like to hear that too. Otherwise, I think John and Stephen have the sense of where the board is going on this one. Going once? Okay. All right. So Stephen, John, are you guys feeling like you have what you need?
I do, yes. And so we'll try and focus on as much sidewalk gap as possible. Might not be able to use the whole 600,000 because there might be other people who have other priorities for it, but what we'll generally try and do is program as much as we can for addressing the sidewalk gaps. And then to answer Micah's question, before you add in the mobilization, the traffic control, design, and a few other things, it's $48 a linear foot per sidewalk for a 6-foot wide sidewalk. But then there's a bunch of other soft costs, so I'm not sure if it'd be $100 a foot or $200 a foot, but I'll work on trying to figure that out as we try and figure out how much sidewalk we can construct in a year.
Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like John has what he needs for the first part of the agenda. And so, do you want to go through next steps? Sorry, John.
Sure. So next steps, I'm going to take this information and we're going to internally get it entered into the city's accounting system for what projects, and basically use what we talked about tonight for the different funding sources and projects. Then from there, that goes on. We do internal review with finance, and then the administration, they do a review. In April, it'll be presented to council with the plan that council would adopt it on May 17th. And then this summer, how we talked about the long-term part of the transportation improvement program, we'll begin some of that discussion and talk about maybe ways that we might want to update some of our projects to better incorporate the mobility master plan goal. So we'll come to the board with some recommendations on changes we think might be good for project scope in order to accomplish what the city would like to do for mobility. And thanks a lot for the feedback. It's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. All right, so I think we're done with John's agenda item, and just in time for him to leave.
All right, thanks.
Maybe he gets a few more minutes.
I have just a quick question. I was trying to type a comment in there. So this year, there hasn't been a lot of revenue from the camera just because it hasn't been on, because there hasn't been school. Is that correct?
Actually, so last year we turned it off because all the kids went home. But this fall, the school ended up having special ed students return to the middle school. And so we actually turned it on in order to have the same enforcement we would. Yeah.
So there's revenue this year. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we're ready to move on to the mobility master plan implementation. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Stephen. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, John. And thank you, Sujata. Tonight, I'm going to give a brief overview of the process that we use to develop the mobility master plan, as well as discuss the implementation work that we're going to be taking on over the next few years. But really quick, the purpose, or at least what the mobility master plan is it's a long-range planning document that the city developed to be consistent with what's going to be what is now in the comprehensive plan transportation element, with our actions that we're going to be moving forward on implementation. that's consistent with the citywide strategic plan. It consolidates a lot of the simplified vision, goals, and policies into one place, and sets a new foundation for kind of our planning efforts moving forward. And one important aspect of it is it doesn't supersede the sub-area plans at the moment, but eventually when we kind of go through all the plans update process, they'll be updated to be more consistent with mobility master plan. Right now we have sub-area plans that call for sidewalks to go in areas that the mobility master plan says shouldn't. And there's just some inconsistencies like that that we'll need to kind of address when we update the sub-area plans. Throughout the process to develop the master plan, the board identified specific priorities throughout how to develop the guiding principles, developing the goals and policies, and what kind of worked out is these priorities seem to align quite nicely with a lot of the priorities that the board's new membership has kind of called out in our discussions this year. Safety being an important priority in terms of users using the system and feeling comfortable, which is a close appreciation of everybody's unique perspective and how they want to use the system, something that we never really addressed before. Another important aspect of the master plan that the board really emphasized was the importance of addressing climate change. Although we don't go as far as going into too much detail on it, the expectation on that is that there was to be an environmental board that was kind of help with some of that work. So this year, they're going to be taking on the development of a sustainability plan that's going to look at some of those climate change. And once they go through that work, we'll look at making updates on how we want to address climate change specific to transportation. And the other important aspect of the master plan is the inclusion of equity and access to the mobility options, looking more in depth of how people actually access the transportation system or how they don't, and making sure that we are identifying ways to make improvements in that area. Another area that the city never really addressed in its planning efforts. Now, in the development of the master plan itself, we took on three major phases of engagement. The first phase, we worked to broaden we worked a very broad range and talked to multiple community stakeholder groups. We talked to many of the boards and commissions. We reached out to a lot of community groups that we never talked to before when it came to transportation topics. Just as it goes with our engagement process, we always start really big, and then as we go through the development of the plan and be more specific, we kind of ramp down who we actually talk to, not because we don't want to talk to everyone, but more as you go through the process, really more specific stakeholder groups want to stay engaged in the process. So in the second phase of engagement, we really focused on developing the policies and project priorities. And a lot of those discussions were made with the boards and commissions and specific stakeholder groups that wanted to stay engaged in those discussions. And then the final phase, we went through the confirmation of the policy changes as well as finalizing the plan. And in each of these phases, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of the guiding principles and really had discussions about why we wanted to use those. So because that's really what was supposed to set the tone for the entire plan. So we really brought that up through each phase of engagement. Now, in the plan, there's 7 major areas of policy changes. The first is the integration of proactive safety measures. Instead of waiting for collisions to happen and making a change, we are looking to integrate proactive activities. So looking at specific infrastructure that has high risk and making changes before collisions actually happen. And the next is fully committing to a multimodal system, something that we talked about before and was addressed in previous planning efforts, but never fully committed to. And we didn't really provide much of a definition, so we actually define it now and what that means for the community, but also what it means for staff in terms of implementation. On top of that, we embedded context-based design principles into the policies. And what that means is that we are embedding flexibility on how we want to design projects based on location and context. So is there a school nearby? Is there a transit center nearby? Is there retail or shops nearby where you might get a lot of people walking on the street or riding their bikes? That's really going to define the type of facility we actually put in place as part of a specific project. And we also emphasize the importance in the coordination between land use and transit, something that we also talked a lot about before, but weren't very specific about. We weren't really specific in the master plan too. We just went a little more detail about how we want to approach it. The hope is that in the next year or two that we're actually going to be having discussions later this year to kind of start the process to develop a transit plan, something that the city's never done before, where we look specifically at just the transit system, how it aligns with the regional goals of King County Metro and Sound Transit, which is our regional transit provider, and how do we better accommodate the transit we actually want versus them telling us what we need, and better aligning that with our growth goals. Because right now we have a lot of growth going into central Issaquah, but not necessarily the transit or the type of transit that we need to support it. And so we want to take that next step with Metro and Sound Transit kind of as partners through that process to help define what those projects should look like. What corridors in central Issaquah should have dedicated bus lanes, or other major roads in Issaquah that should have major transit stops or different accommodations so that it's easier to access transit throughout the community. And the other important aspect of transit and coordination with land use is also looking at investments for intelligent signal systems. That's adaptive signals. So instead of having it timed and the signals can actually adjust based on the traffic patterns that are going through the intersections. What's important about this too is that ITS improvements also make improvements for safety for intersection crossings. There's accommodations for bike and peds crossings at intersections that ITS can make improvements on. And lastly, the next part is the importance of parking management. So in 2019, the city took on a study to look at parking management strategies. And so we referenced a lot of that study in the master plan so that we're not trying to have any conflicting strategies or information in the master plan itself. And lastly is that identification of access, of affordability, as important elements of our mobility system. And it's imperative that we explore this further as we go through the implementation of the master plan, because we don't know yet really what that fully means for transportation. But as we go through the design of the TIP or developing our program to fill the sidewalk and bike gaps, we can look a little bit closer on where we are delivering those projects or filling the gaps and making sure that we're addressing affordability and access to transit or access to any other community resources as where we want to prioritize those type of projects. The other important element of the master plan is it identifies kind of phases of implementation. So we put in this timeline for the next 2 years that looks at policy improvements, program development, but also evaluates the projects that we're currently developing so that we can take a look at what projects we should be pursuing in the near future. What's important to kind of remember with all this is that with the pandemic and a lot of other things going on in our society or our local community, there's a lot of changes to how we have to approach this. We can't necessarily say, this is how we can do things right now, because the travel patterns have completely changed in the next year, and they continue to change as we move towards recovery and restoration of how things were before. It's created limited, it's limited our financial resources quite a bit, not just locally, but also federally and statewide. There's a lot of grants that have been reduced because of COVID. There's grants that no longer exist because of COVID. And so as we were kind of moving forward with implementation, we have to take that into account, that things are just going to be constantly changing. And as we approach even the TAP development, probably for next year, it's going to be changing on what we can go for in terms of grants. The other big impact from COVID and the changes in our community is transit funding. King County Metro was already forecasting a financial dip in the next 10 years, where they're going to be short $2 billion. And we were going to have to find out as a community how to fund that. The biggest, solution that was being pursued before last year was some type of metro levy. They don't know where that stands anymore. So as things continue to change, we'll have those discussions on how to approach it. And lastly, there's also the elevation of the importance of equity and access. Specifically for transportation, we need to really look at more beyond just access to transit, but also how do we improve access to just our community resources, whether that's through the sidewalk gaps or bike lane gaps. So for timing and next steps, we'll be making a bunch of policy updates this year. Some will be involving you and some that are already ongoing with City Council, one of them being Complete Streets. Later this year, we'll be hoping to start that discussion on transit with the board on terms of laying out what the foundation looks like now and what's coming up next with King County Metro and Sound Transit, and then start those discussions how to put together the transit plan, particularly of what should our transit system look like in the city of Issaquah. Should we consider a restructure? Should we be focusing on growth, or do we need to have a balance with neighborhoods? And so staff will be posing those questions later this year as we kind of start those discussions. In 2022, we'll be taking on an update of our concurrency system. And for those of you that don't really know what concurrency is, it's how we it's the system where developers are investing in the infrastructure for a city. So as a developer comes in and proposes a 1 million square foot development, they are required to pay a certain amount of funding to support that development. And right now, our model isn't adequate to fully look at the multimodal connections for developments. And so we are going to be looking at how best to do that in concurrency. And so we'll be looking at potentially hiring a consultant to help us kind of walk us through that process. All right, now I'll open it up for any questions. I know I kind of just threw a lot at you, so I'm happy to go back to any slides if anything seemed confusing. We'll be covering a lot of this over again as we kind of go through implementation of the master plan. Jerry, I see a question from you about is concurrency the same as mitigation? Yes, it is. And it's just handled in different ways, whether you're looking at so John had talked about the bike and ped mitigation fee. That's part of concurrency. Our developer impact fees, that's part of concurrency. And so looking at our level of service of the system, that's also part of concurrency. So we'll be taking a look at all of that next year. Any other questions? Any concerns?
It was a great summary. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping I could get at least all the information for you available in case you want to read it on your own. But feel free to let me know if you have any questions about what's in the plan or what's not in the plan. I think one of the more interesting aspects of the master plan is in the beginning parts of the appendices, where we put together a context report of where the city is at right now. We collected cell phone data to look at travel behavior for our area. And it really looks at where people are coming from, but also their destinations in the region. So we looked at all the other growth centers around in our region, and we looked at where a lot of people are going for work or where they live. Not specifically, it kind of just looks at general areas, but you can kind of see the travel behavior patterns, and it really looks at in a little more detail of how many people actually stop in Issaquah if they're just passing through, or do they even stop at all? Okay, well, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, so if there aren't any, one comment I'd like to make, Tom and I were both sort of carryovers from the previous board. And, one thing just, I'm sure all of you have noticed, Stephen and John and everybody at the city staff, they do such a good job of integrating comments and listening to feedback, answering questions. And so, as the board was forming and we were trying to actually understand what we were supposed to be doing, and asking a lot of questions, that plan really, however they guided us, we just sort of trusted that process, and the plan at the end really, we all felt as a board very much reflected, kind of our values, the values of our community, the individual communities we all come from in the city. And it really sort of puts, what our vision for mobile Issaquah would look like. So just sort of, from the board side, I think, and Tom chime in, but we just felt like the process went very well and staff did a great job. And we hope as community, as you guys are coming on, it's seen as something that's very useful and reflects your values too, because it's what we are, presenting as the face of Issaquah's mobility. So.
No, I'd second what you just said, Sujata. I think you said it very well as far as it first came together and kind of thinking from a collective backgrounds of people that were on the board as far as what did we want to see, what was the vision and values of where it wanted to be and go. So that was good.
Yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention with master plan, what's in our work plan that I'll talk about in a minute is at the end of each year, we're going to be kind of doing a review process of the master plan of, is everything that we've set up working, or do we need to reconsider something and look at making any type of revisions to the plan? So it's not set in stone. It is a very much a livable plan that we're trying to implement, but at the same time, if something's not working, it is open for taking a look at if we need to make any changes.
Okay. So if we don't have any more comments, then I guess we can move on to the next agenda item, the various reports. And it looks like, Stephen, we're going to start with the board work plan. So from you.
Yeah, I can pull it up if that's easier, but really there hasn't been much change to the board work plan other than for April, where we're kind of dedicating a whole meeting for the racial equity training for the special meeting that we'll be working on scheduling.
This is Tom.
Are there any?
Oh, sorry. This is Tom. The only thing I see on the schedule when you click on the link for the work plan is in March is the 18th meeting. So the other training I don't see on the calendar of the schedule.
Let's see here.
Wait, Tom, you're saying you don't see it on the schedule for April?
Oh, April, sorry. I was looking at March. Yes, it's on the schedule. April 15th, tax day for April. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was like, I'm pretty sure I made that change.
I see it.
Okay.
Refresh.
Yeah, so that was the biggest change, was that we originally had a couple agenda items for April, but right now it's going to be dedicated 2 hours for the racial equity training for the April meeting.
Good.
For whenever that gets scheduled. Right now it says the 15th, but it's either going to be the 13th or 14th. And then for May, I'm looking at potentially changing the agenda for that meeting as well, to have that follow-up discussion specifically on transportation and racial equity. Because the one in April is going to be a general racial equity training with our consultant. And then the May meeting will be a more specific racial equity training or discussion specific to transportation.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, Micah, did you have a question or comment? No? Okay. Did anyone else have any more questions about the work plan?
It looks like Erica has
Oh, Erica.
Erica.
At any point, are we going to dedicate specific time to talk about complete streets, or is that not for us?
We can. That's a question I can talk with the chairs about of if we want to talk more about complete streets. Do you have a specific question on it?
I just need to know more about it. So if I can do that on my own, if that's not a priority of the board, or if that was something that was discussed last year, but yeah, I would love to know more about it.
Okay. I think what we can do, because we have so many new members, we can send out a survey and ask everyone if that's something we want to add to the work plan, and we can put together a 20-30 minute presentation to kind of talk about complete streets. If that works for you, Sujata? Yeah,
I think that'd be a good idea. And maybe, complete streets, there's Vision Zero, there's, there's a lot of, I remember at one of the previous meetings, we were talking about, there was tons of regional acronyms like PSRC and blah, blah, blah. So maybe there's a acronym soup kind of overview policy conversation about how all these, because there's state legislative money, there's these regional bodies that give us federal funds, there's a lot of fingers in the pot. So maybe one meeting we can do an overview of what all those pieces and parts are. So yeah, maybe in the survey, if we sort of gave some ideas of topics and just saw, and maybe it's like, kind of a 15-minute sort of deep dive into a certain transportation wonky thing. That could be interesting for people.
And I think a complete street overview would be good, because that's kind of the whole basis of the transportation between curb to curb, building to building, incorporating all the components of the transportation within that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about this? If anybody else has any other topics they want me to add to the survey, send me an email, and I'll try to get that out probably by the end of this week, just so we can start planning to figure out which meeting that'll fit in best. Does that work, Sujata? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Okay, so staff report.
Staff report. I just want to give a quick summary on the early February study session that we had with City Council. We covered a lot of topics. I don't know if any of you got a chance to listen in or watch it. We were able to talk about our programs that are going to be our kind of ongoing programs in terms of like maintenance, building construction projects, ADA curb ramp projects. We talked about transit a little bit. Council asked us to take a looking at a shuttle system, which we'll be bringing back to them, I think, at the June 9th study session. So more information about that will be coming. But one thing that will be kind of changing around is looking at when we want to look at street standards updates. And so that might be coming a little bit later in the board's work plan than originally expected anyway. And then, the last thing is the mobility master plan will be going to council for adoption. They'll be adopting the actions and strategies on March 15th. And then at that same meeting, they'll be making, considering the complete streets amendments for approval, which was also discussed at that early February study session. That concludes the staff report.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Does anybody have any questions for Stephen on either that council meeting or the council study session, or any other questions posed to staff or any other information? Tom?
I was just saying, I think there was something in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Is there a schedule of, yeah, Jerry, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, and it's hard to type it, I suppose. I was just curious about when the council was going to be doing a work plan or doing a work session with the transportation group, is there an advanced schedule of that we would know about? So like
Yeah.
you had that work session, right, in February, and like I wasn't paying attention, and then all of a sudden it was that evening or something. So I was just wondering if there was one way, if it's listed somewhere on the City of Issaquah website so we could find it and plan to listen in if we wanted.
Do you mean when they discuss transportation topics, or
Yes.
the staff specific work plans?
So I thought when they were discussing transportation topics, is staff specific work plan something different, Steve?
They're related. So this year right now we only have 2 study sessions. We'll be going to council to talk to them about a work plan. This first one in February was about our 2021 work plan, and then the one in June will be different topics, but more specifically on the 2022 work plan. And
Okay.
that's right now. Those are the 2 like transportation specific study sessions.
Okay. And so do we know when that is scheduled for already? Is that already on the city council website? And I
don't know that it's on the city council website. They usually don't get that posted until a few weeks before each council meeting. But I can tell you right now it's on June 8th.
Okay, thanks. So I will make a note of that.
And then the other thing that's going to be coming that I forgot to mention is that there may be a special joint meeting with the environmental board, park board, and the I think Economic Vitality Commission to discuss the whole CIP, but also the TIP. And it's not required that everybody needs to attend, but it would be nice to have some board members attend to kind of give the tab perspective on what was kind of discussed with the TIP, but also if you have a chance to review the full CIP, that'll take a look at all the environmental, all the infrastructure, and everything else that all the capital projects, other capital projects that the city kind of takes on. So more information will come out as we get closer to that.
Thanks, Stephen.
Good, thank you.
All right, I don't see anything else in the chat, so no other questions for the staff report. Then we'll move on to chair report. I don't really have a report, but one thing I will say is for the snowstorm that came and stranded us on our hill, I very much appreciated the crews. The roads crews were out, plowing away and sanding and really keeping Issaquah, at least the parts of Issaquah I visit, everything was really kept moving. So I was surprised that there was that much snow on the ground and that we were still able to get around. So personally, I'd just like to give a shout out, and Stephen, if you could pass it on to the operations folks, that, everybody in my neighborhood was just floored at how quickly things were moving, things were cleared up, and even downtown Issaquah, people could get to groceries, for the people who don't plan for Armageddon, they could get to groceries and everything. Like, I heard very good feedback about the ability to get out and get about after that snowstorm. So big shout out to the maintenance teams for making that happen. But otherwise, yeah. Does anybody else on I know it says chair report, but we have a few minutes. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to comment on? Pretty street they saw, I don't know.
But I was too impressed. I don't remember ever having that much snow and it being so easy to get out and about. I had to drive to the grocery store. I did take my wife to work though, because she works an overnight shift to the hospital, and I didn't want her driving back in unknown conditions. Of course, on the way back, when I picked her up the next morning, it was fine, but I didn't know that on the way. But
Yeah.
Issaquah was great. Once I got out of the little hump to my neighborhood, everything was good.
Yeah, I'll second that. Driving around the Highlands is spooky in the snow because of the different gradients, and I drive a Honda Civic, so it's not equipped to handle snow whatsoever. But so I really appreciate, yeah, all the main routes being super clear, and like the minimal amount that I did was out and about. It was, yeah, made it less spooky.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. And then the youth report. Anything exciting happening?
Yeah, I actually do have a youth report today. So I sent out a survey for, I guess, transportation, like interests and concerns, based on the youth advisory board. I got 16 responses out of, I think, the 40 different representatives on the board. So I might wait for like some more responses. But for now, I guess I can just report some of my findings. So, in terms of public transit, one of the questions was before the pandemic, how many people use public transit? And 7 responses said they never had to use public transit, while the other 9 responses said that like they have used public transit or they do like once in a while or frequently use public transit. And in terms of concerns and or interests, the most common concern that I saw out of the survey was that 1, there weren't enough electric vehicle chargers. 2, some people said that sidewalks in certain streets aren't necessarily safe enough, but 3, another really common interest was pushing to implement like the linked light rail or increasing public transit options. And on top of that, making school transportation more suitable for like the pandemic so that kids could attend school again. Those were the most common concerns and like interests that I saw. And in terms of efficient transportation and also like clarifications that some people had or comments, one person said that they thought Second Avenue and Sunset Way had a lot of traffic, but I looked in the transportation improvement plan, that was already like one item on it. And one person said they wanted to see more roundabouts being used in the community, and another person said that they want to see public transit focused on more. So yeah, that's basically everything that I found through my survey.
Some really good feedback.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm excited to see if you can get more, more response rate. And especially that Vanabout is interesting in connection with what Stephen was saying earlier about the shuttle thing that council wants them to look at. So also it appears to be a high priority for the youth population. So that's very cool. Okay. And so I think that's good. Is there any other business, any announcements for the good of the order? Go for it.
Christy here. If you haven't seen the news yet, I am super, super excited that Raleigh Properties today signed a lease with REI. So they will be joining our community at 2005 Poplar, right at the gateway to Issaquah. So we can't think of a better brand to welcome our citizens and visitors. Company that really cares about shared values with us as a community. And so I'll share the article that the Seattle Times posted, but the coolest thing is, we are in the middle of a pandemic and the future of work is unknown, but they're going to use this building for testing technology and the future of work. And hopefully post-pandemic, we'll see 400 new employees and jobs here in our community. So pretty big deal.
Good.
So that is really exciting because after they decided to not occupy their big Bellevue facility because they were going all remote, I was wondering about that. So that is very, very cool for Issaquah.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Cool. So we're excited for our community.
Okay. All right. Well, if there aren't any other announcements, just our next meeting is scheduled for March 18th. And we have an exciting agenda and for that meeting. And I think we're going to actually be done early. So that's kind of exciting. Okay. Well, I think it's 7:26 and we can adjourn. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Second that motion.
Thanks,
yeah.
everyone. Have a
Sorry.
good night.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a good night,
We're all
everyone.
learning.
Good night.
Thank you.